Welcome back to the Floyd Memorial Library Podcast, a window into the soul of the North Fork of Long Island. We'll delve into the pulse of our community, its pressing issues, promising opportunities, and the rich stories that weave our shared history. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 73, we sit down with Nick Krupski, the Solid Waste Coordinator and Southold Town Trustee. We explore his deep roots in Cutchogue, where he grew up immersed in the unique landscape of the North Fork and its farm life. Nick shares stories of his childhood, his early fascination with science, and how these interests led him to study at college and eventually work for Cornell Cooperative Extension and Brookhaven National Lab. As we delve into his 9 years with the Southold Town Trustees, Nick discusses his involvement in various initiatives and how the opportunity came about for his current role as Solid Waste Coordinator. We'll also explore his innovative efforts in composting and recycling and how he envisions Southold Town navigating the complexities of waste management in the years to come. Finally, Nick reflects on his hopes for the future of Southold Town, offering insights to what lies ahead for this vibrant community. Well, I hope you enjoy episode 73 with Nick Krupski. This episode was recorded June 21st, 2024. Thank you so much for coming on to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris. I appreciate the ask.
Absolutely. So I'd just like to start off if you could give us a little introduction about yourself, where you were born and raised.
Sure. Well, my name's Nick Krupski. I was born in Southampton Hospital, but I spent my whole life in Cutchogue on the family farm.
And in terms of your ancestry, how far back can you go, either your parents' side?
So at least in town, it was Elizabeth and Joe Krupski who owned the property and house that Pindar now is at. And then right down the street there is Julius and Nettie, and they literally owned the house that Lenz occupies. And kind of neat. They're doing tastings inside. So I sat in my great grandparents' house and did a wine flight like a year ago. Mm. And then across the street from there, where our current farm is, that was Helen and Albert, who were my grandparents. So that's where I spent a lot of my time as a kid. And then on my, and obviously my parents are Mary and Al, and they live right around the corner from me in Cutchogue. Mm-hmm. And then on my mother's side, that goes pretty quickly back to not Northern Ireland, but in North Ireland, mm-hmm. So that was Thomas and Elizabeth also. And I think that was in the 1800s. And then fast forward, my grandfather was in Brooklyn, but my grandmother immigrated here in I think it was 1955, mm-hmm. and she was 16, I believe. And she came over by herself to work, and then eventually she met my grandfather, and they bounced around quite a bit, and then they ended up out here in my grandfather owned Southold floor covering for a very long time in Southold Baconic border there on mm-hmm. 48. So, and that's where like my mother worked, and I spent a lot of time in the floor covering, climbing over rolls of carpet too, mm-hmm. as a kid. So, and
did you got to meet both sides of your grandparents?
Yes. Yeah, I was blessed, up until recently. I had all four grandparents. I don't know, the last 6 years or so. Mm-hmm. Three of them have passed away, but growing up I had all four grandparents, and I had a couple great grandparents that John and Helen Sider that lived in Mattatuck on like Mill Lane and Oregon there. But my grandparents were great growing up, and the two of them were at the carpet store, two of them were on the farm, and I split my time in between, when my parents were working, kind of thing. So a lot of good memories there.
With the ones that were on the farm, would they talk about their experience working on the farm, or what it was like initially for them coming out here?
We talked a lot about farming growing up, and it was always a discussion of like if I was going to come back to the family farm too. And my grandmother, and she was so good to us growing up. I mean, she was the type of grandmother who would always have cookies in the pantry, and she always had a pitcher of iced tea in the fridge. And she would always tell me, like, don't be a farmer, it's too much work and there's no money in it. But I mean, really the lion's share of the history we discussed was, my great grandfather in up by Oregon Road there, John Sider. He was a potato farmer, and one of his sons was a potato farmer. And then, my grandfather and my father were potato farmers, and then they more so they really got into like the fall crops, cabbage and cauliflower, and sprouts, and they have a lot of I don't want to say horror stories about that, but a lot of really hardworking, long days, tough seasons. And then my father's the one who transitioned into like pumpkins and squash and gourds and stuff like that when he got out of college.
And in terms of your parents, they grew up out. I mean, did they both grow up out here?
So my father grew up at the main, home, what I would call the homestead now in Peconic there, which is where we have the pumpkin farm. Now actually my sister and brother-in-law live in my grandparents' house there. They rebuilt it a couple of years ago. So that's where he grew up. My mother was originally from Brooklyn. And then they were up in Suffern for a little while. And then they actually lived in like almost the last house in Orient before you get to the ferry for a few years. And then she ended up in Southold.
And how did your parents meet?
I believe they met through mutual friends at a softball game. My father used to play a lot of softball in those leagues. Yeah. I shouldn't say a lot, because I think his father would call him back to the farm and say, "Hey, we gotta pick a couple trailer loads." But he played softball when he could, when he was younger.
And we had your father on for the interview, and he would talk about that they would have a lot of potatoes, but he would never get tired of the potatoes. But did he have any other stories that he might have told you in regards to farming, or what it was for him growing up there?
Well, I mean, he speaks mostly fondly of it, I will say. And I think at the time it was a lot different in that, the North Fork was really wide open, and there wasn't a lot of trees. Long Island had been pretty much cleared for agriculture. So, he would hop on his bike and you drive across the farms and go to the creek, and play in the creek or go to the beach. So he had a lot of positive stories about riding across other people's farms and through his farm, and, having friends over to play at like neighboring farms and swinging into ponds and stuff like that. I mean, the one kind of comical thing, this is like an inside secret, but he hates cucumbers because, there was a lot of like kind of monocrop agriculture going on at the time. So I guess, for a couple of years they got really into cucumbers, and picking cucumbers is backbreaking work. And it also, I mean, anytime you're picking them, it gets all under your nails and your hands turn green. You smell like cucumbers for a couple of days. So because of that, you'll never see him at the barbecue eating a cucumber salad. So.
Oh, and then just with your mom, what did she do for work? I guess after she had met your father.
So she originally went to school in Delhi, and I believe she went to school for hospitality. Or I know she did, and which eventually, now she's at the farm. So it actually kind of it worked out well. But when I was a child, she was at the carpet store. She was managing the day-to-day operations at the carpet store for my grandfather.
Okay.
Which is cool for me. I mean, there was a warehouse behind there. The building's still there now. And I would just climb all over that place because they have the racks of carpet, and you could go all the way up to the ceiling, and there was always piles of scraps that were like 30 feet high. And as a kid, it was a cool place to have free reign of and explore, you know?
Yeah. And how many children did your parents have?
So I'm the oldest, and then I have 2 younger sisters.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, so how was it for you growing up in Cutchogue and as a child? You mentioned with the carpet store,
Yeah.
but like, what other activities would you do as a child?
I mean, I feel really, fortunate because I think I had a great childhood. I did start working on the farm around 8 years old. That was when I was, carrying pipe and helping pick things in the summer. So that was where a lot of my time went. My father and grandfather were really good at bringing me around, though, and things moved a little bit slower back in the day. So you'd go, talk to another farmer, and like they'd pick me up in the truck, and we'd drive over there, and I was a little kid bouncing around the seat of the front of the pickup truck, or sometimes the bed, and so I got to meet and interact with all these like adult farmers and see what was going on their properties, and like Tom McGonigal's property in Beconic, like he had a couple horses there, and I was always fascinated by that because we never had a ton of livestock or anything. And I like one fun thing is I got my first truck at 8 years old. One of the neighbors to one of the farms had this old Dodge, and for the life of me, I can't remember what make and model it was, but it was similar to what like a Dakota is today. It predated Dakota though. And it was a 5-speed, no power steering, this little pickup. And I had to sit on this big cushion to be able to see over the steering wheel because I was pretty little at 8 years old. And the first day out driving it on the farm, you only drive on the farm, obviously. The first day out driving, I came around a turn with my father. He's teaching me how to drive. And I'd already driven tractors and like sat on his lap before, but he's teaching me how to drive like my truck, So I come around the corner, and the power steering, the truck's turned so hard. It was an old truck, and I just crawled right into a tree. And we were doing like 3 miles an hour. So, and it was an old steel bumper. So we just hooked it to the tractor and pulled it out and, said, "Don't tell mom," and went, and went on our way. But I the first vehicle I learned to drive on was a 5-speed. Wow. Which is pretty neat. Yeah. And that truck lasted for another, 10 years. I was driving around the farm, and we used to use it to pick produce too. And I hand painted the body at one point, the whole thing, cleaned it up nice. And it was something to do as a kid. Yeah. But in terms of, childhood overall, spent a lot of time, like, my parents were always busy. You had asked earlier about my mother working, and she eventually transitioned to working on the farm with my father, mostly like managing the stand, especially as my grandmother got older. But they were really good. Like, she would take us to the beach in the summer a lot. He would make sure to take off time for us. We'd go in the creeks. We had a little rowboat, and he'd tie a tractor tire behind it, and you'd sit in the tractor tire, and he would tow us out to Fleet's Neck. Do some snapper fishing. We always tried to go crabbing at night in like August, for blue claws and get some eels. So, and you started working on the farm pretty early. How was that experience? Was it expected of you, or you enjoyed it? Was that kind of a tough question? I would say it depends on the day. Looking back, I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate the memories, and it taught me a hard day's work very early. And there was a lot of, like, even at the time, there's some really fond memories that I had. I enjoyed in the moment, like planting. One year, I planted every tomato that we grew with my grandfather, and we were renting a piece of property across from the elementary school in Cutchogue. And it was just tomatoes. It's a 1-row planter, so it was just him on the tractor and myself on the planter for, days planting tomatoes out there. So it's a really cool memory. And at the time, I remember thinking, like, it's neat. Not a lot of kids even then got to do it, and now there's even less now. So, when you talk about like August and carrying pipe with water that was pumped out of an irrigation pond that's just hot and dumping all over your legs. I was like, okay, this is not the best thing ever. But looking back, it's a great memory, you know. Yeah. And you used to, play games with it. They're 40-foot lengths of aluminum 4-inch pipe. So they're heavy, especially when they're full of water, but not tremendously. So, the trick is you pick the pipe up first and you pick it up a little higher than the other guy 40 feet away carrying the pipe. So all the weight goes to him because the water flows that way. And then if you do it right, the water, dumps out onto their leg and gets them. So it's kind of a little keeping things fun, you know.
Yes. Oh, and then now in terms of your schooling experience, did you start in, was it East Cutchogue School or for elementary school, and then did you go to Mattituck?
So yes, so I first went to kindergarten at what is West Cutchogue, which is that little building on over on Depot there, and it's now an administrative building for Mattituck Cutchogue. It's a little square building. It's actually kind of cool looking. So I went to kindergarten, first grade there, and then the school used to break it up differently. So I went to Mattituck for second, third, and fourth grade, and then I was at East Cutchogue in right around the corner from my house there till sixth, and then I went back to Mattituck. They used to bounce before they renovated the school. I had the unique experience of the elementary school was under construction for my last year there in like sixth grade. It was the whole place was torn apart. And then my class goes to Mattituck, and for our like junior senior year, the whole school was torn apart because they were starting the next renovation there. So we went through two major construction projects in our time in school.
But it wasn't. Yeah, you had to move around a bit there.
Yeah.
And with school, did you have any favorite subjects or core classes that you enjoyed? Even in, I guess, if you wanted to move towards high school.
Yep. I would say, I mean, I liked history and science the most, and I was fortunate to have a lot of good teachers in those fields too. So in the very beginning, I wanted to be a history teacher. And at the time, the market was flooded with history teachers. So like teachers and parents and friends would be like, "Oh, don't go for history. It's flooded." Not really like, and the funny thing is people say that, but then by the time you're out of high school and college, that market changes. So like then the history went into, I think, like a deficit of history teachers. So I guess I could have gone for history, but I really liked earth science, and I had a couple of great earth science teachers, and then through that they also did marine biology and meteorology. So those were great like add-on classes that I took with the same couple of teachers there. And that was ninth grade, and then 11th grade I think was AP Bio that I took. And between those two, I fell into the sciences, which kind of led me to go down a path of science as, after high school, college, and afterwards.
And your dad had done plant science or soil science?
Chemistry and plant science, I think. Yeah. And I don't know if it was a minor in soil science or I'm unclear exactly what that degree is, but yeah.
What were you... For coming out of high school, you wanted to continue a path in the science area, but were you not sure what career you were thinking of at that time?
So, right, I really liked science. I wasn't positive what I wanted to do, but I was looking at, these couple of teachers that I really liked. And that, at the time I was 17, they had summers off, and it was like... And they really, they had really good camaraderie there in Mattituck at the time. And so I was looking at what they had, and I was like, honestly, in terms of a career, that looks great. And I like kids. I like the idea of education. So originally I went to school with the idea of going into education afterwards. Someone did tell me along the way, it could have been the guidance counselor in Mattituck, who was another great guy that I had. but someone advised me along the way. They said, go to undergraduate for whatever you're interested in. And you can do the education afterwards, the education degree afterwards. So that way, instead of having a split degree for undergrad, if you go for, say, earth science or geology, then you can go and be a geologist if you want. Mm-hmm. If you still want to teach when you're done with that, then go for education. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. I went to undergrad. I went to SUNY Cortland for 4 years, and I completed a bachelor's of science in geology and environmental.
And also, deciding on where you wanted to go to school, were you at that time coming out of high school wanting to explore outside of the North Fork or off of Long Island or see something different?
It's that's a great question. It's something I haven't thought about in a long time. I really think I had such a good experience here that I liked the North Fork, and I always intended to end up on the North Fork. Going back to the summer times and the kayaking and the fishing, clamming and crabbing and hunting in the winter time and all that. So I did want to get out of town and go away for 4 years, but I always kind of intended to come back, which I did. And in choosing a school, I mean, definitely the state schools, I can't say enough positive things about. The cost has gone up significantly, unfortunately, for education, but at the time it was pretty reasonable. Yeah. And I applied to a bunch of state schools, and I ultimately ended up in Cortland. And part of the reason was there was a ski mountain like 5 minutes away, and I wasn't like an avid skier or snowboarder at the time, but it's something I really wanted to pursue. So that's part of the reason. That's not the sole reason I decided to go there, but it was a really nice perk, at the time. 17, 18,
Yeah. And what were you thinking of now after you had graduated from SUNY Cortland?
Yes. So while I was in Cortland, I don't remember if it was my sophomore or junior year, but I needed an internship. So it was probably junior year. I needed a summer internship, and so I started to reach out because I said, well, let me, I enjoy going home for the summer, having access to the beach. So I said, let me reach out to some places at home and see if I can find anything. Otherwise, the school would help you, put you in contact with somebody. So I ended up contacting someone at Cornell Cooperative Extension in Southold here. It was Chris Smith, who was running the scallop restoration program at the time. So I didn't know anything about what they were doing. I mean, I'd gone to camp there as a kid, and I like kayak camp and summer camp. But I didn't know anything about what they really did there. So anyway, I got this internship, and I was going to school for geology and environmental. So because of that environmental concentration, I was able to do things that were maybe a little bit more bio-based. So the first summer, I 08, 07, 08, probably 08, I started working at Cornell Cooperative Extension. Unfortunately, it was a paid internship, which was nice. It wasn't a lot of money at all, but it was something to buy lunches with. Yes. And so I started with Kevin Cahill, was the boat captain there at the time, who since passed away. He was a great guy. I kept in contact with him till he passed away last year or 2 years ago now. But I don't know if you're familiar with the scallop restoration program at all. But it was early-ish on, and we would hop on the barge and go out to Orient Harbor and shake the scallops out, clean them off. And there was another group that we worked with through CW Post, and they would come out and take measurements of the scallops, the growth and the gonads, and take dry weights and wet weights of everything. And it was a really good experience. And at the end of that summer, they were happy with me, and I was happy being there. So they invited me back, and I actually went back in the winters too, when I was home on winter break for a month to help them. And I also, when I went back to school, I had to do a presentation, explain what I did, and, slideshow and the whole thing to a pretty large group. But it was a really interesting project, and it in my opinion, worked very well. Little more trouble lately. I think there's a temperature issue in the bay, but that it brought the scallops back, in my opinion. So anyway, that was more bio. So then when I finished up at SUNY Cortland, I had a job offer from Cornell Cooperative Extension. But in my head, I always wanted to go to grad school and get that teaching degree. So I kind of doubled down. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go to school, but I had that job offer. So I came back home and moved back in with my parents for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked at Cornell Cooperative full time in Southold, and I went to night school I ended up at CW Post in Brookville.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 3 days a week. So at night I would drive up there. A couple of times I stayed with a cousin of mine that lived sort of in the area, but I went to night school for 3 years. And I completed, I kind of doubled down on the sciences. I completed a master's in biology with an add-on of the education. So I did get my teaching certification. Mm-hmm. So at the end of that process, I did student teaching, and I still had this full-time job at Cornell, which I was really enjoying. So I did the student teaching, but I was really happy with the field work I was doing at the time. So I kind of, I fell in love with that outdoor science, and so I never pursued the teaching. I stuck with the field work. And by that time I had transitioned to eelgrass restoration and some marsh restoration. They were getting more into it as I was actually leaving Cornell, but at that time it was mainly, I was scuba diving 5 days a week all over, Great South Bay, the Baconic Bays, Gardeners, out at Fishers, Long Island Sound. We were in the Rockaways, in Queens there, in some different areas doing some restoration work. It was really, really cool stuff. So that kind of held my interest in science and trying to make a difference and make a change there. So that's sort of the foundation of how I started my career. Then went from, looking to be a teacher to really enjoying science, and that, led to some further consulting opportunities down the road.
And how did the opportunity come about to work at Brookhaven National Lab? Was that more? Was there a jump there, or?
Yeah. So there was probably in between Cornell and Brookhaven Lab, there's probably about like 5 years or maybe a little bit more.
Okay.
So really briefly, I left Cornell, Cornell was a great job. They're doing great work over there. There's some really great people. I was just looking sort of to move up a little bit, I guess financially. So this job posting popped up for Suffolk Water Authority, and I said, well, let me give that a try, because I was trying to get in there as a geologist. And so I went and met with management, did the interview, and I told them that, and they said, well, listen, this is for a field operator. You just go out and sample the water and treat it. It's chlorine, lime, but you do all the testing. And they said, that's your foot in the door. So when the geology job opens up, you switch to geology. So I got into that. I ended up getting my water license, which was the 2B license for New York State. And I enjoyed that work. And there was actually a lot of troubleshooting in there, and like all the different pumps and programming, and something always broke. I mean, I don't want to misquote it, but there's hundreds of pump stations and wells in Suffolk County. And so there's so many systems and so many people, and they're pumping so much water. So there's something always broke, and it's not like always intuitive about what it was. So you had to sit there and think about it and then go make a fix. And I worked nights for a couple of years there. And so I fell from this habitat restoration into water, still somewhat in the sciences, but not really utilizing too much of the science. And about that time, we had a family friend working for us on the farm. And he bought a piece of property in Maine because he wanted his own farm, and it was a little too cost prohibitive on Long Island. So he buys this property in Maine. So all of a sudden it was just my father on the farm with no help. So, I was talking to my family, and I always, I liked farming, but I knew how much work it was and how much time you have to put in, but I never really gave it a full shot doing it full time. So, at this time I didn't have any kids, and I said, let me try it. I owe it to myself to go back to the family farm and try it. So I talked to the higher ups at Suffolk Water and said, this is what I'm doing, and they said, give us a call if you ever want to come back, kind of thing. We parted ways on really good terms, and I went and farmed for like 2.5 years, full time, and it was a good experience. But it's exactly what I thought it would be. It's hard work, and you're I don't want to say fighting Mother Nature, but you're dealing with Mother Nature. You're at Mother Nature's whim, full time. So I had some really good experiences, and there was like 1 year it just rained all grow season, so nothing wanted to grow, and another year it had beautiful produce, and then it rained every busy weekend in October. So about that time I started having kids with my wife, and I just was looking for kind of a more stable paycheck again. I did enjoy my time farming full time, and I'll always strive to keep the farm going. I think it's like a collaborative effort between like my parents and one of my sisters and my brother-in-law, and my wife is really into it. So that's something that I'll always kind of keep going if I can. But another friend had told me about Brookhaven National Lab also has a water department, basically it's a small version of what Suffolk County Water has. So lo and behold, there was a job opening. They had just posted a job for that, so I applied for that, and I was there for 5 years. I had my license already, so I started there. And the work there, we were providing both potable water for people on site to drink, and then also the cooling water for all the experimentation. So, and that was everything that went along with that. There's also some sanitary work there, some lift stations, a lot of pump work. It gave me some good plumbing experience that I never really had. I worked with some great, really great people that were really talented there.
Yeah.
And I was there for 5 years. I was there up until very recently. So I can't really say enough positive things about the lab. They're doing some great work there.
Okay. And well, actually, I wanted to ask about your dad, because he was already involved with the town. Was he a trustee when you were still in high school? Or?
So he was a trustee. That's a good question on timeline. Something there. I want to say there was something in 2005. Maybe he ran for town board, but I could be wrong about that. But he was a trustee for a lot of my schooling, and then he switched to town board. And then he first ran for the county. I would have been out of college already. So he was on town board while I was in college, in undergrad at least. Yeah, that would be the timeline there. So he always, farmed full time, and I mean, he just goes and works like an 80-hour work week all the time. He'll farm and work at the town, and it's he's got like a very impressive work ethic.
Yeah.
So.
And how was that experience, having someone in a public facing role, even say when you came back to work on the farm, just someone that's been involved in the community for a long time, and even when he was at the legislative level, is that something that you see him you see him as your father, but then he's also this public face? How did you kind of think of that at the time, maybe? And yeah, I'm trying to think of a better way to word that, but
I think I know where you're headed towards with that. So, I mean, I remember being very young, and he was a trustee, and it's probably that's probably the root of how I got into the sciences, to be honest with you. Because I remember like hopping in I don't know, it was a kayak with him, and going to like look at someone's dock. We like paddled out to look at it, and there was someone going by too fast, and we were talking about why there's a 5-mile-an-hour wake zone in the creek, so you're not eroding the marsh grasses. And I was just really like fascinated by it, and the protection of the creeks, and like coming from a farm, it was like a cool balancing thing. I didn't really appreciate the fact that he was like this elected official either, that was like running every few years, and it was all the work that went into that at the time. But that's something I went on to appreciate as I got a little bit older.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like it's pretty impressive. Like he's had several very impressive careers. You know, he's been successful in public office, in my opinion, because he's like the most honest person I know, and he's always just trying to do the right thing, whether or not, you know, you agree with exactly what he's doing. He's like, you know, from his core, trying to do the right thing, what he believes for, you know, the town of Southold and then Suffolk County. So as I got older, I grew to really appreciate what he has done. And, you know, I always looked up to, I remember going on like a trustee inspection with him and Jimmy King and looking at an outfall pipe in like Mattatuck Inlet somewhere. And I was really young. And that stuff just kind of stuck with me. And it was always in the background. And in my mind, I never thought, well, someday I'll run for trustee. But that is what happened. So.
And what year did you run for trustee?
So I'm in my 9th year now. So I think it was 2015. Yeah, it was 2015 would have been the election year.
But you never thought you were going to be involved in local government.
No, that was not on my radar at all. I was at a fundraiser on Shelter Island, and we started talking to a committee member about it, and they said, "Oh, you should run." And so I went and screened, and ended up, you know, they gave me the nod to run that year. And it was a good fit too, and I was happy and appreciative to get the nod, but also I had the science background. I was doing habitat restoration work. You know, I used to work for this other company doing consulting all over the country at Superfund sites. So, you know, I had a really good background to go into it. So that's part of, and then, you know, I start thinking, like when I was asked to screen, I started thinking about like growing up and my father and like being impressed of the whole situation. And so it just seemed like a great fit. And I've been there ever since.
And would you say over your time as a trustee, have a lot of the issues or opportunities and things that have been discussed throughout that time been similar in terms of what things that the trustees are trying to accomplish or work on? Are they similar? Like a lot of people would say, still working on the environment and land preservation and affordable housing, a lot of the similar issues that people might say, oh, well, we've been talking about that for the last 20 years.
So it's funny you say that. I mean, the only response I can have, well, there's a few different things I've noticed, actually. So, I mean, one funny, you know, thought on that is, I don't know if you know Eric Sepnosky. He's a trustee, and he has the farm out in East Marion.
Yes.
And when he first ran a few years ago, he was sending me newspaper articles from the 80s with my father involved. And some of the problems are the same exact problems we're dealing with now, you know, and it's all about preservation. It's kind of like an ongoing battle, you know, with finding that divide between, you know, preserving the environment and the resources and public property rights. And I think that's been going on since the beginning there. And I think that's the point of the trustees is you're trying to strike that balance and preserve what's there, but, you know, let people utilize the waterways.
And more just maybe just to gather some info in terms of some of the differences between the trustees and the board and what the trustees are more focused on or what they do. Yeah,
that's actually a great question, because so many people aren't really familiar with the trustees. Because in Greenport here, you have the village trustees that are basically similar to the town board in Southold. So the trustees operate under the Andros patent, you know, passed down from the days of the king there. And basically they own the town bottom, and they're the ones responsible for protecting that public resource. So I'm not sure exactly what year it was, but the jurisdictional line was changed within town code to extend 100 feet out from the wetland border. So if you at times it's been interpreted as the mean high tide line, but it's really wherever the wetland vegetation or soil sediments or any indicative species ends. So then it's 100 feet back from there. So that's the trustee current jurisdiction. So it's everything in the water and 100 feet outside of it. Also from any banks or bluffs, it could be, or dunes, it could be 100 feet back from those. Any ponds, freshwater resources. So any activities that homeowners want to do within that jurisdictional boundary, they have to come before the board and apply for a permit to do it. So that's home builds. That's we see a lot of pools lately. It's docks. It's any property protection, whether it be revetments, bulkheads, jetties, groins. Even we actually one big thing that's kind of a hot topic right now is like if you want to take down trees or even trim trees, because we're at the boundary between natural resources and manicured property. So that's something we're trying to kind of protect some of those resources and keep some of those like native oaks that are thriving alive.
Yes. And what would you say over those? It's been 9 years.
I'm in the 9th. Yep.
What would you say you're most proud of with what you've accomplished so far as a trustee member?
I mean, overall, I think I've just been a very fair member. And my father said to me when I first started, trustees have no friends. And it basically just means that everyone who applies, you look at it through the same lens. It's you take the personal out of it. And, I went in from an environmental background, but I also spent a lot of time on boats growing up. I had friends with boats, and we did a lot of fishing and water skiing when we were younger. So I was in both camps on that, which I think was a really healthy way to go into it. In terms of like hard accomplishments that I'm, really, really pleased with. Not too long ago, we actually banned docks, new docks on the bay. Which it's so beneficial for public use, because in order to have a dock on the bay, first of all, you have to live on the bay. So then you're the only person that can utilize that structure. And it always extends, several hundred feet out into the public waterway to get to achieve a depth where you could actually put a boat there. And there's a lot of problems with that, because people walking the foreshore creates almost like this barrier. So this public property that you're kind of permitting this dock on, and people are allowed to walk the beach below the high tide line. That's public property almost everywhere throughout town, which not everyone knows. And then also for like scallopers or anyone fishing or kayaking, now you have to go around this 150-foot dock sticking out. And then you get into storm damage, and some of these docks have huge fetches. So from the north or the south, depending on the direction of the storm, first of all, you can never leave a boat on it if there's anything over 5 miles an hour weather-wise. If you did, the gas and all that could contaminate the bay or wherever it washes up on someone's property, or just the structures in general get blown out. So in doing that, we really gave the public a lot of property back and a lot of rights back to utilize that space. And the second thing, which is it sounds like a silly thing, and some people roll their eyes when they hear it, but very recently we firmed up the definition of a pier line in our code, and that applies to two different things. The simplest is docks. So when we go to permit a new dock, or if someone's applying for an extension to get to deeper water, depending on where you are in the creek, you have to look at your two neighboring docks and draw a line between them, and you can't extend past that invisible line. And that prevents creep, again, from people going out into the public waterway. Because what used to happen is you'd have these shallow creeks, and you just apply for a 200-foot dock to get out to the water, and now anyone crabbing or fishing or boating would have to go all the way around that structure, not to mention the wildlife and resources that you're now shading and putting treated timber into. So by doing that, we kind of established averages in creeks and kept everything back against properties, so people can still put your boat there. You can still have a ladder or steps to kayaks or paddle boards. But it kind of limits. You're not going to be able to put a 200-foot dock out to a bright red cigarette boat, and so that was kind of a big deal. The other part of that pier line definition is we actually applied it to home builds too. So when you're building a house, you draw a line between the living space of the two immediately adjacent properties, and your home living space or covered area can't project past that line. The reason that's important, and it kind of predates me because the trustees have been trying to uphold this for some time, but they were having an argument about it every month. So that's why we codified it and really tightened it up. But everyone wanted to be as close to the water as humanly possible. But by doing that, you're going to block out your neighbor's view, and you're putting all that structure right against the native, natural habitat. So we kind of limited the creep closer to the creek. If anything, we try to pull people back. And that's A, for the habitat, but also we're seeing more erosion. We're seeing more intense storms and higher tidal swings. So the further we can pull people back, not only are we protecting resources, we're protecting all their investment, and some folks don't see that. Some folks are new to living on the water. They're not aware of what could happen. I mean, there's a property on the Sound that we've seen lose like 25 feet of bluff. It's like a 100-foot bluff, and this 25 feet of it, when I first started, part of this house that hadn't been inhabited for a few years was literally hanging over. The propane tank was held on by the hose. And they applied to us and pulled the structure back. And I don't remember the exact amount of feet, but it's back at the bluff again. I think it was like 25 feet back. So that's a tremendous amount of material and property that's gone. So that's something we're trying to protect, both sides, homeowners and their property and the resources.
Yeah. And I think we could go to how the opportunity came about for you to become the solid waste coordinator for the town of Southold.
So it's a good story. I was at the lab, and I was very happy at the lab. And I, like I said earlier, I worked with a great group of people there. And there's so many opportunities too. I mean, I will say for anyone who's looking for a job, and I mean, there's everything there from office clerks to high level, proton scientists, and there's everything in between. There's like 3,000 people that work through that site. But a friend of mine who was familiar with my background in the sciences and consulting, he knew that Jim was looking to retire and had been for I think a year. And he said, you should apply for Jim's job. So I didn't know. I was in like liquid waste and some sewer stuff and dealing with the water issues and the consulting. So I called Jim Bunchuck, who was my predecessor there, and I just started to talk to him about the job a little bit. And I asked what his background was, and it was in consulting and the sciences. And I said, well, how did you end up here? And he said, he moved to he was living in D.C. and he had originally been in Southold, and him and his wife wanted to move back to Southold, and there was this job that popped up it was an environmental position at the time, but the reality was it was running the town dump, which was still a dump at the time. So we kind of clicked on that, and the science and environmental background was really appropriate for what the job demands. So I applied for the job, and I think it took a year till the town board was able to sort of figure out what they wanted and how it was going to go. And I applied for the job, and I got the job.
And how long have you been in that position?
I started the end of March. And
what are the primary responsibilities as the Southold Waste Coordinator?
So the short answer is you got to keep the trash flowing. People bring their waste to the dump. It's no longer a dump now; it's a transfer station, which means we don't actually landfill anymore. The landfill there's been closed for quite some time. But the job itself it's a pretty serious position. You're responsible for all these contracts, being that it's a transfer station. Someone has to come in and remove the waste, or we have to truck it out. MSW, which is Municipal Solid Waste, that currently we have a contract with Covanta in Babylon. So our waste goes to the waste to energy plant there and generates electricity. The C&D which is the construction demolition, that is currently going to Brookhaven landfill. And this contracts with all these different vendors to come and remove that. This contracts with different companies to recycle. On top of that, we're running a pretty nice compost facility there. So we take in all the yard waste from Southold Town, both through the highway and the residents. And from the leaves, we generate a really nice compost that's a really popular product that we sell there. And then we also make mulch, wood chip mulch and different grades of mulch. It's all natural right now. It's not a dyed product. We age it naturally. It gets a pretty nice natural color of brown. And we have large chips that have a little bit more of an upstatey look down to very small product. But on top of that, it's dealing with vendors. We have a ton of equipment there. That's I just saw I got a text from the mechanic fabricator there. Things break down all the time. So it's dealing with the equipment. There's 15 employees, and there's a great group of people there. But it's dealing with everything that comes day to day with employees. There's state regulations, there's federal regulations. EPA, DC, health department that has to be complied with. The closed landfill we're sampling on a regular basis for both. That's an annual basis, and that's for air and water. And then DC recently passed regulation that we have to sample around the compost site. So we just recently installed 3 new wells, and we'll be water sampling there. And I suspect they're trying to catch PFAS, which is the forever chemical that I'm very familiar with from the water business. And then, there's also the day-to-day operations dealing with the public, and we have a tremendous amount of people that come in there every day. We accept oil for free if it's clean oil. We accept hazmat 3 to 4 times a year. We run 3 to 4 paper shredding events, and it's all free of cost. Some of that is paid for. We apply for a yearly grant for the hazmat. We take batteries, light bulbs. So really providing a huge service for the town. And there is some fee involved with certain things like the actual garbage and the C&D, but some of it, like the oil, is a service we provide to the residents.
And what would you say is the biggest challenge or challenges you face in managing the solid waste in Southold?
Well, the current challenge, there's a few things, but the looming challenge right now is that Brookhaven landfill is actually closing at the end of the year. So a lot of the islands, and we live on an island. That's one of the, honestly, that's the biggest challenge. We live on an island. Everywhere else in the country, they have better access to rail cars or trucking routes. They just throw the waste and they send it to a landfill where another state is accepting it. Or they have more property and they have their own landfills that are still active. So Brookhaven landfill is going to shake a few things up for us. They're currently taking our C&D, and we have a contract through Matatuck Environmental, which is now Maggio, and they take it up to Brookhaven. So we're working with them to find a new alternative place to send that. Ultimately, we will. But the big challenge is that all the waste that is now being produced is going to be getting shipped off the island, at least for C&D, which you're talking about, I've heard up to 80,000 more trucks on the road. And that's not from Southold. That's from Long Island. That's a tremendous amount of traffic. So with the county exec and all these other towns, we are investigating investment in railways, and there's a couple private companies that are trying to put in rail stations now, and that's a little spatially limited too. Trying to get the rail cars through the city too, commercial rail through the city. There's not a great route there. And then the second thing would be glass recycling. There's not much of a market for glass anymore, so that's something that needs to be looked at really hard in the future, or we're going to be throwing away glass and having to charge for it, which would be really unfortunate. And then the final thing that we're really trying to wrap our heads around and get ahead of right now is we're getting radiation now at the landfill, or at the transfer station, I should say. So with that, it's people doing either at home treatment or treatment at clinics and then going home, and we're getting like sanitary products that are radioactive, and they're slightly radioactive. And I actually brought in this great gentleman from Brookhaven Lab a month ago to give a talk to my staff about the safety of it. And they're relatively low levels, and it's a safe thing, but there are state standards on that radiation. So we're in the process of installing a radiation detector for when you go over the scale. Because I can't send radioactive material to Babylon to the incinerator, because if it goes over the state levels, they just have to park that trailer for 2 weeks while it cools off, as the half-life breaks down. So that's something we're working on getting ahead of. We have a hand scanner, and we're installing this more serious, pretty elaborate scanner, so that we'll be able to pick up on it as it comes in, and then hopefully we can pull that out of the stream and either store it on site in containment. Or I'm trying to get it out to the public to please, if you are undergoing these treatments, take that waste, store it outside your house, away from your house and family for say 2 weeks, and then you can bring it to us. It'll be perfectly safe then. Because it's very low levels that we're reading, it's like millirem per hour, but you don't want, you wouldn't want to leave it in your house in a trash can for the 2 weeks. You'd want it outside, and outside in a garbage can is fine. There's no real harm there. But
is that something that has happened in the past, or is that more recent?
It's very recent. It's and I'm not sure exactly why we're just seeing it now. Part of the reason is that at end points there's the state passed that you have to have scanners, and you have to report when you get radiation hits to the state. So like, we're not required to have a scanner. But if I'm sending a trailer load and there's a little bit of, hot isotopes in there, then they park my trailer. So that's really the problem that I have. And we do run a lot of material, so I can't afford to have a 100-yard tractor trailer parked there for a month or, a couple weeks. So I suspect that, this treatment has been going on for some time. But it wasn't really being watched or observed, and now it's something that's on the state's radar. And I think ultimately, and part of the reason we're installing our own detector, I think ultimately it's going to be a mandate from the state for everyone to do. So we're kind of getting ahead of it, but also it's just something we have to do, so we're not losing a tractor trailer while it sits. And
I don't know if you can say with the Brookhaven landfill, why did they decide to, or why is that closing?
So that was, I think that the short answer is, and I don't want to speak too far out of turn, but I think the short answer is they are running out of space. They're going up and up and up with that. So they are going to accept ash from incinerators. I think they're going to be able to do that till 2027. And if they kept taking C and D, they would run out of space sooner. So I think that's why they're stopping accepting C and D at the end of this year. But I think ultimately they're running out of space.
And are there any other operational landfills on Long Island?
There's a small one in Islip, but they don't accept too much from.
Okay.
They take some ash.
So that's why you're going to have to.
Yeah, and that one will probably close soon too. I don't have an exact date on that, but
now. Another question would be just, how can the town of Southold implement or have more incentives to promote or reduce waste so there's less coming in? And with recycling is one thing, because that you're still having to process that, but just reducing waste so there's less waste going out of the town.
That's like the topic I've been dealing with since I started, and it's a great question. I mean, so what Southold has done so far, and this predates me by 20 years, is we have the yellow bag program, which I don't know if you're familiar with. It's pretty controversial. Everyone, all my friends since I started, and even people I've just met, are like, when are you getting rid of the yellow bags? But the yellow bag program does work because it incentivizes people to recycle, because it's a pay-as-you-throw program. So the idea is there's a rough calculation of the weight of what you can put in a yellow bag. The size is small, medium, large. And say it's $1.50 for that bag. That $1.50 is what we pay for it to go on a trailer and go to the incinerator. So you're actually paying directly, and we're not marking that up. You're actually paying directly to get that waste to the incinerator to get turned into electricity. That being said, when people have to pay for something like that, they're more inclined to say, let me pull that water bottle out of there and recycle it, because that takes up bag space. So the idea is that if there is a charge associated and recycling's free, like fill up those recyclable containers, make sure you pick through it after you have a party and send all that stuff into recycling and save. So then you're saving money and ultimately the resources.
And is that for the recycling program? How do residents get involved with that? If they want to recycle, that's separate from, because the yellow bags are all just for regular trash.
Mm-hmm. So if we have a lot of self-haulers, which are people who just come down to the transfer station on a daily basis or a weekly basis. So you get a permit, which is $30 for 2 years from the town, and that's a residential permit. If you have a second car, it's $15 for an additional car. So it's a pretty affordable user fee, and that's just for garbage. If you want to recycle and you have another place to send your waste, you can recycle for free. So you don't need a permit. You can just come down while we're open 7 days a week. We're open from 7 to 5, except for holidays. 70 hours a week. So you can come down, and we currently have 3-stream recycling. So there's commingle, which is metal and plastic. There's glass for now, and there's fiber, which is cardboard and paper. And you back your car into the wall, or you can pull in. There's not into the wall, hopefully, but there's a curb and a walkway there, and you back up, and then everything's divided up and it's signed and labeled. So your yellow bagged garbage goes in the center, and then on either side of the yellow bag area, there's the 3 sets of recycling.
Okay.
We also accept metal at no cost. And then there's also appliances. Some appliances are metal, again, at no cost. Anything with Freon, there's a small cost involved that helps us pay to have the Freon removed before we ship it out.
But so there's no pickup at people's houses for recycling?
Not at this time. So we don't have there's no curbside in Southold Town. At all, except for private companies. So there's a few private companies, and you still have to use a yellow bag because that's still the user-free fee, because those companies are just carters basically, and they're picking up the waste from your home and bringing it to our facility. Some of them are sorting the recycling out, and some of them, hopefully you're putting recycling or bringing your recycling yourself and just sending garbage.
No, I mean it seems like it's a challenge throughout the country, and just I've seen programs even living in other cities or towns where they've kind of done different initiatives, or I think initially in one place I lived you had to buy a different bag that was for recycling only, and the trash bags you could just buy trash bags from the store and throw those out. But I think that was in the 2000s. But I think we're trying to get more people to recycle, but I don't know if it's just creating that extra step, or some people might have an argument saying, well, it was already something that was made, so it shouldn't have been made with that already, so it's not making as big of a difference if we have to recycle. And then I don't know, there's some other arguments as well, but is the department also trying to engage with the community and provide other programs about sustainability or waste practices?
So there's basically what they have been doing is there's flyers for the pay as you throw, which encourages the recycling, and then they've been putting ads in the paper. Also, we have an electric sign at the transfer station that we put facts up about the recycling. I will agree, it's hard to get people interested in it, and when recycling first took off, there was a lot of buzz and a lot of push. It's kind of quieted down now. And there's some misconceptions, like, oh, that's not even getting recycled. I hear that a lot. Metal is the best one that can be recycled all day. Like I said earlier, glass is a real challenge. I don't have an answer yet as to where glass is going to end up. If you separate it by color and it's clean, there is somewhat of a market, but really it's cheaper to make new glass. So I don't know where glass is going to end up in the future. I mean, it can be used in some products like concrete, blacktop a little bit. Grinding it up, it makes a nice product. I've seen it at like the Matatuck boat ramp had glass gravel there. But it's not that desirable right now. So getting people interested further, because there is still some, there's a market for some plastic. The paper does very well. So what I'd like to do in the future is, reach out to schools and kind of get in front of some students and talk about recycling. Because, when I was in like 5th grade, my teacher was Peggy Dickerson, and she was really into the environmental stuff. Again, it always comes back to the environmental. But she took us on environmental field trips, and she's a 5th grade, general teacher, but her focus was science. And the push there, and she actually went on to become a trustee she did a term as a trustee. But the push there was, like saving water and not flushing the toilet for no reason and turning off your sink and a lot of estuary stuff. And that year they put together with the Baykeeper, a whole conference about. I dressed up as a sand crab and did a presentation, and if you can make an impact with the student body, when they go home to their parents, they say, why don't we have a recycling can here? Why aren't we separating out our plastic and metal? And I think that's a good way to get a little boost in numbers. And especially I have a daughter who's starting kindergarten next year, and she's in UPK this year. And, getting in there and seeing her and talking to some of her classmates and trying to generate some interest, I think that can only help.
Yes. And I've seen, there's been other pilot programs or test programs throughout the country or even throughout the world. Even in Japan, and they have a lot of programs where it's really specific ways of how you would organize and recycle material. But I think going at some big facilities, like even the school systems or hospitals where they do go through a lot of waste material, would be a good place to improve on.
That's exactly right. Because right now schools do not have recycling programs, and there's no state requirement either, which that kind of blows my mind, because
it's kind of surprising.
It's like kind of the low-hanging fruit. You look at how much product, like in school lunches, is recyclable and reusable. And like you said, schools and hospitals, that's a hot topic, and it would be so easy to just say, you guys got to set up some bins and do a collection. And and honestly, they have staff there that can assist with that, and could probably make something work pretty easily. Like, where are all those milk cartons going?
Yeah, we've talked about some of the common misconceptions about waste. Do you have any other future plans or innovations in the waste management in Southold that you might be exploring?
So I'm working with a few different environmental groups right now. The thing that I'm probably the most excited about, and there has been the most push for lately, one of the groups is Drawdown East End, but is a food waste pilot. And they're actually, I'm working with them to try to get a grant right now, to try, because food waste is a huge percentage in the household solid waste that comes in. And so we're paying to take this product to the incinerator, and then it gets incinerated and it comes out as ash, and it is generating energy, and the incinerators follow some pretty strict guidelines. It's not a bad thing, but if we could pull, a quarter out of that, 25% out of that stream, it would be huge, financially speaking too, and carbon footprint, all that. So what I'd like to do with that grant is do a little bit of more public outreach campaign and see if we can get people composting at home. In a perfect world, I'd like to either subsidize or purchase, fully purchase or partially purchase some at-home composters for people, because the best case scenario is you don't drive an extra trip to us to bring us your food waste. You compost in the backyard and then put it in your garden. So that's one thing I'd like to do. But we are also going to start so that you can, for people who don't have the space or the means, to bring their food waste separate to us. So that there's been a little bit about that around town. Different groups trying to do something, and this group did something at one of the farms. A pilot at the farms a couple years ago, and they worked a little bit with the town, but this will be the first time ever that we actually, if everything goes through with the grant, we actually get a pilot at our facility going, where you can bring your clean food waste. So,
and would people doing the composting there, could you do possible where people could get through the composting process, people could get soil to use for their own?
Yep. So the long answer on that is, right now I'm making a great compost product. Between myself and the staff down there, that what we're putting out, and that's all leaves. It's all natural. It's leaves. Actually, it's brewery waste, and it's manure that we bring in. And that's a product that we sell, and I have it tested every year, and it's a really nice. My predecessor did. I just had it tested this year, and that's a really nice product that, especially tree farmers, when you're planting new trees, you put that around it. It's so nutrient rich. It's just nice dark earth. So I haven't fully gotten there yet in terms of this compost stream. I'm going to keep it separate for now because I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what the test rates, the test results are going to look like. One thing we have to be really careful about is contaminants. Like, people can't be throwing plastic forks in it with the food. It's really important to keep it clean, just limited to food. Take the stickers off the banana peels, stuff like that. But what I plan to do is have a container set up, say maybe 2 days a week, and at least for the pilot, maybe limit it to 100 households. Come down, roughly 2 days a week, deposit. We'll provide either a compostable bag or like a bucket or pail system. You can deposit your waste, and then what we'll do is mix it in with it's a mix 3-to-1 greens and browns. So we'll mix it in with the leaves. I'm gonna keep it separate from now to see what those test results look like. It might be a better product, it might be just a different product, maybe it's more appropriate for gardening, less appropriate for the trees. I'm not sure yet. But we're going to start mixing it on site and as a separate product. Maybe it ends up that if you are a member of the food recycling club, you could get a bucket at the end of the year kind of to start your own garden with and just keep the circle going.
Like more of an incentive.
Yeah, yep. I suspect eventually it will become a requirement with New York State to do separate food waste. So we're trying to get ahead of it. There's already some other towns, I'm sure there's other towns on Long Island pursuing this. Riverhead's starting a project too. They started a year ago, I believe. But there's some towns that are off Long Island that have been doing it for years that we're going to take a look at too. So it's pretty excited about that. I mean, I think it's a big deal monetarily, carbon footprint, creating that circle of you eat the banana, throw the peel out, and then you get to, plant something in it. In a year or 6 months, depending on what kind of aeration we get and heat on the product. But there's a lot of potential there. I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah,
I mean that's a good program, and I think just moving ahead of some of the, say maybe the state, or I don't know about federal, but just the state level changes might be a little slower in terms of being implemented with recycling or other sustainable programs. Trying to start that early is a good thing, but obviously there is always going to be probably some pushback here and there with requiring these extra steps. Is that something that you see changing in the future with? I mean, because it is interesting when, like you said, when things first started out, I remember the recycling, and it was like everyone was really excited and trying to do it, and it has lost steam, and I don't know if that's just too much of an effort to put into what they might feel is not going to be that crucial for the environment, or just making that effort for a more sustainable or healthy environment in the future? Do you see that changing again in the future? And I don't know if you still need to have, I think you, with a lot of these new technologies, or new, say even with electric cars and
Mm-hmm.
incentives with that, that's still an expensive item, and
Mm-hmm.
people might have differing opinions about that because you still have to recycle maybe
Mm-hmm.
the lithium battery.
That's a whole other. That's
That's
a
a
whole
whole
other
other
problem
topic.
that I have. Yeah, yeah. I could talk about lithium batteries for a while. Um, I think with the food waste, the results are right in front of you. So I think there's really good potential to pull out a large percentage of waste.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the results. I mean, there's no question. I've had people ask me, when I'm walking around the floor, like checking on things, like, oh, well, this isn't recycled anyway, is it? And it's like, well, the food waste, yeah, come look at the product. This is leaves and food here. Like it's that was somebody's cheeseburger, or and so that's something you could really, like, literally hold in your hands. And so I think whether or not a mandate comes down soon, and we're going to have to do some outreach on that, because there's a group of people who are going to be really excited about it. I think I could get 100 households interested pretty quickly, but then it's capturing everybody else. But you know what? If we slowly build and can just move in the right direction, I think that's fine, because then by the time there is a mandate from the state, which I think there will be, we'll be in good shape. So if we have to then double what we're doing, then so be it, and I have a good staff down there. We have the right equipment. I could, if we get enough, we could start windrow piling it, which is, laying it out in, 12 by 20 foot piles and turning through it and aerating it after you get good water and heat on it from rain. That speeds up the whole process. So there's potential to fold this right into the operation we have already. So, and it's just a huge benefit, not trucking. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I've never brought food waste to the transfer station. We have the farm, so we always composted, and then my wife right now has 8 chickens, so they eat all the table scraps, which I love that idea too, because you're turning table scraps into eggs. So, and even the shells are really good for the chickens to eat afterwards. So you're creating this perfect little cycle there of not wasting food. It used to drive me crazy wasting, like, table scraps. The kids, they say they want that extra grilled cheese, half a grilled cheese, and then it gets 3 bites out of it. But giving it to the chickens is great. They're turning it into more fuel and food, and it's a nice, and they're eating bugs and ticks and the whole thing. It's a nice little cycle to have a few backyard chickens.
Definitely. And I had just a question. It might be more personal in terms of what you think about the town of Southold, and 3 issues that you feel are important.
That's a big question. So you mean in general, not just at the solid waste facility?
Yeah, separate from that, just in
Yep.
general, your personal opinion.
I mean, personally, to keep it really broad in general, I would say evolving population, changing kind of dynamic out here, overall land use, and, water quality and environment. And that one obviously hits close to home for me. But that's kind of tied in with the population change and with land use. It all comes kind of back to that.
You mean more with handling growing population on the North Fork, and other people have said it's hard to becoming more of a strain on the area just
Certainly.
as you add more people, whether it's through waste, and traffic and new construction or housing that might be put in place. And do you feel that with the land use, because I just wanted to talk briefly about farming and kind of the future of farming.
Yeah.
How do you see that? Because I had talked to your father and asked about, well, how can we keep farms going, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously with the economics, and it's a challenge, but wanting to keep that history. But obviously the market is not the same as it used to be, and
Mm-hmm.
just your thoughts on that.
So, I mean, in terms of the farming aspect, the way that we've been able to do it for so long is everyone who works on the farm has a off the farm income, and that's how we've been able to really keep like a true farming operation dynamic going. I mean, we did kick our season back a little bit because this year we were all especially busy with our off the farm jobs. But in the evenings I'm out there planting every few nights with my father and some family friends, and we have some eggplants in the ground and a bunch of tomatoes and some corn and peppers and herbs and onions and lettuces and a couple different varieties of berries, and we're just trying to keep the whole process rolling. In terms of the sustainability of agriculture out here, I mean, it's certainly, something that we have to continue to work on. I don't have like a silver bullet for it really, but I don't really want to see, these farms become like restaurants to keep the farm going. I'd like to strike more of a natural balance with that. It would be nice to see, and there is some laws surrounding this, is, how much you have to produce on the farm to sell there. You can't just be buying all the goods in and creating kind of like a market, which I like that idea. So, and what I've been seeing lately is it seems like some of these farms with growing popularity, they offer a lot. Like there's some animals, there's, they might be selling pork, like Deer's farms there. They might be selling, sheep's wool. The farm down the road from me, 8 Hands, has huge variety of stuff that they're making there. So, I mean, I think what I'd like to see, first of all, land preservation helps with all that. Because once that's gone, it's gone, and there's a tremendous amount of pressure. There's money in building houses with big houses and big pools, and so I want to preserve everything we absolutely can. And then I think sustainability is in the variety, and I think offering everything from microgreens to maybe some animal products to being creative without over expanding and leaving agriculture too much. I think there's a good opportunity there. If that means I'm buying coffee that was beans were purchased elsewhere, but maybe the cream is made on site, then so be it. And I don't think that's a bad thing, as long as you're sticking to the roots. I think that's what I'd like to see the most.
And I think just lastly, in general, what would you hope to see the future of the town of Southold and the community down the line?
Well, I think I want to see Southold, growing up, it was such a special place for me, and it offered so many different opportunities and entertainment, and like that smaller town culture, and I'd like to see that available for future generations. I mean, I had two great parents growing up, and very good sisters. We're still very close, and spending that time at the beach. We have clean water. Like the beaches don't get shut down like they do further west every time it rains. You can go clamming or oystering or crabbing. I do like the more rural character of Southold. I'd like to see that preserved. My wife and I live in Cutchogue on the family farm. I have 3 kids, 5 years old, 3 years old, and 8 months old. And I'd like them to have the same opportunities that I did growing up, like being able to ride their bikes around the neighborhood. And, to some extent, the town has done a very good job at preserving open space, and I think that's very important in protecting the character of the town. In other ways, we've kind of moved away, maybe a little bit more touristy, but I don't think we've gone too far, and I think in some ways it'd be nice to swing back and make it a little quieter at night, maybe get rid of some of the uplighting that is plaguing the skyline at night, and stick with our roots and get back to our roots a little bit. And my push is both just a resident and a public servant. Like, I mean, lately, like, trees have been a really hot topic. Like, I think the days of chemically altered lawns and that are super fertilized, I think we need to trend away from that and get to more, bush and native tree species planted areas. And, I have a lot of friends and family in the landscaping industry, and there's a real opportunity there because there's still a ton of work in making these properties beautiful and a little bit more native and friendly to wildlife, while still making them look beautiful, and get away from lawn irrigation and get into drip for the plants and really plant it up that way. And that will hugely protect the water quality, not only the groundwater, but also the runoff that goes into the creeks and bays. So if we go a little bit more natural, I think there's still a lot of good opportunities for people to utilize their property and to have it look beautiful, but really preserve the native features out here and keep Southold, a real natural area between farms and woods and properties and people's property rights. I think we can all find a nice balance there.
Yes, I hope so. And then I'd like to just ask if there was anything else you'd like to discuss or say that we haven't talked about.
That's a good question. No, I growing up, there was always sort of that idea in Southold that there's nothing for the kids to do, but really it comes down to just get outside, I think, and that's why I try to throw my kids out the door every day. And we've been really fortunate. We have the farm right behind us, so my kids are running around on the farm in the mud and stuff, turn the irrigation on, and they're out there picking things off the farm. But another good opportunity is my wife, Rachel. She does a raised garden bed in the backyard, and it's funny because we have this 30 acres of farm field behind us, but we have this little 3 raised beds in the backyard. But for my young kids, it's a great opportunity for them to sit with her and weed it and take care of it. She's planting different crops than we grow on the farm for a little variety, and they're learning about how to actually do that, and it's farming on a small scale. So I think that's something that everyone could do a little bit more of, and we eat out of those. The farm is a few months out of the year, and then her gardens are like 6 months out of the year. So between the farm and that and the chickens, and I do a little bit of hunting. We eat off the land a lot, and I think there's something really to be gained. I think there's a lot of opportunities for hobbies for the youth and people in the area. It's amazing. We live in wine country. It's a lot of fun to go to the vineyards and the breweries, but there's also a lot, get out and hike and, go to the beach. And we try to, we make a point around here. We live in like beach country. Like we try to go to the beach at least once a week. And if in a perfect world with young kids, it's hard, but we try to really go twice a week. One evening we'll get a pizza and go down and swim. And then, on the weekends we try to get down for a couple hours and hang out. So, we live in such a beautiful place, and there's so many things to be positive about, and we really try to focus on that and utilize what's out here.
Yeah, definitely, especially in the digital age, and a lot of younger people are being introduced to the screens much earlier on than what I was used to. So I think it's important to get them outside and involved outdoors in the community and not cooped up inside.
I agree, and that you saying out in the community, and we went to, I think it was 2 weekends ago, we went to the Village Green in Cutchogue, and the Historical Society there does this awesome family day, and Mark McNish runs a lot of it, but there's a lot of other Mr. Crosser's involved, and there's a lot of great people involved. And they brought in like the infantry, Suffolk County infantry, and they're shooting off the muskets. And they had, so many people dressed up as period, in that time period. And, there's a lady cooking over open fire. And, being a public servant, you kind of go to that stuff. But really, I enjoy going to so much of those things. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't that well attended this year. And it's a great place to take young kids. And, that's something maybe down the road I'd like to get involved with just to keep it going, because I think the history is so important. So, I want to definitely give a shout out to them and tell people like it was a great time. And it's simple. You can go down for an hour and a half, see everybody. I think there was a food truck there in case you want some food. Otherwise, the lady cooking over the open flame was serving stew, and there's so much opportunity to get out and like get off the screen,
Yep.
and like my kids love going there, and they were like looking at the making of wampum. There's someone from the reservation there, and they're fascinated. My girls love dolls, so like there's the antique dolls on display, and I'm spending the whole time making sure they don't grab the thing and run out the door. But yeah, there's so much to do around town. You just have to find it, and yeah, stuff like that, being involved with the community. Southold Historical also does like the Christmas tree lighting, which is awesome. There's a lot of the historical societies do great work around here, so it's a great way to go spend a day. I mean, Horton Lighthouse, you go and tour the lighthouse and then hike on the beach for a couple hours. I mean, there is so much to do out here, and a lot of opportunity to learn something, as opposed to just like you said, staring at a tablet all day and getting a headache by looking at the screen.
No, definitely. But I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come in today and tell your story and your involvement in the community, and also the environment, and your passion for water and keeping the North Fork clean and moving in for a sustainable future.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I think what you're doing here is great. Dipping into all these different topics and the history of everyone and the history of the area, and and then you even jump into where we're going in the future. I think that's a really helpful thing, even if it just starts the conversation, in a really like non-biased way. I think that's awesome. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 73 with Nick Krupski. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.